So thank you all for joining. My name is Billy Atwell. I'm the Chief Communications Officer for the Diocese. We're hosting this webinar. In addition to that, we've got Bridget O'Boyle, who is our Director of Digital and Social Media, who will be presenting, Matt Riedl and Jim Salitsky, who will be taking us through a lot of the technical side of live streaming and how they do what they do. So we're going to go through what's actually the live stream setup. So, how we do it, how to enhance your existing live stream setup, and then, effectively promoting your live stream. That's a key part of this. We can establish a live stream. We can produce a beautiful live stream, but if people don't know that it's happening, it's going to feel like it fell flat, and it's not going to feel like an effective tool. But if you're both creating a nice live stream and promoting it properly, you're going to then know if live streaming is a good tool for your audience. And you'll also learn over time what instances is a live stream most appropriate. We've gotten better about understanding when is a live stream going to be good for us, when is it not going to be actually helpful for us, so that it's a tool, it's kind of an arrow in our quiver. It's a tool that will come out when that tool applies. We've seen some real benefits to live streaming. We've certainly seen some growth in the YouTube following that we've got. We've had like a 188% increase in subscribers, a 70% engagement increase. That's not likely completely due to our live streaming, but we think it's certainly a substantial portion of the reason as to why we had those kinds of increases. There is an audience that really wants to see stuff happen live and witness it as it happens. There are a lot of people, though, that also will see it afterward. You'll see people that will tune in and watch what happened live after the fact, kind of a watch on demand, so to speak. Just an FYI, at the Diocese, the setup that we're using is what we're using right now. The cathedral is moving in the direction of installing what they call PTZ cameras, which are pan, tilt, zoom, basically remote controlled cameras that will reduce our footprint in the space, so we don't have to have extra people in the building. They would be in a specific space where all of those cameras kind of route back to a computer and set it all up. So thank you all for that, and I'll kick it over to Bridget, our Director of Digital and Social Media.
Hi, everybody. I'm going to stop sharing for 1 second. My name is Bridget, and I work in the Office of Communications with Billy, Matt, and Jim. And we are just going to go through the basic nuts and bolts of all of the equipment that the guys will bring over to the cathedral. I'm going to cut it over to them, and then there will be time for Q&A. I mean, if you want to put questions in the chat for now, that's fine, and we can hold them for that Q&A time, but there will be time to ask and answer any of your questions after they go over all the individual items and the equipment and the software. Same with my portion. When we get into the social media side of it, I'm going to go through my process, and then there'll be time for Q&A after that. So I am going to kick it over to Matt and Jim, and they are going to go through some of our slides where they will answer questions, and they're going to go through what is in their camera bag right now.
Awesome. Yeah, so as Bridget said, I'm Matt Riedl.
And I'm Jim Salitsky.
And we're multimedia producers for the Diocese, which means we sort of produce all of the live streams that you'll see on our social media channels. We get there early, we set up all the equipment, all that jazz. And so we hope that we can sort of take you guys through our setup today, and if there's any helpful tips, that we can give you, that's our aim.
So the first thing we'll start off with, as you can see on the screen, we have our camera. We use a Sony NX100 camera. It's a camcorder, it's a professional camcorder. It's got everything you basically need: an input for your audio right here. It's got an output for the HDMI. You got your zoom lens on it, and none of this, like, you don't need to worry about attaching or detaching the lens. It's all just one big setup.
Yeah, an important thing to note too is we do use camcorders to live stream masses, and like I know some people use like Mevos or even various iPad apps. We think that if you just we'll go with a camcorder, that gives you the most flexibility in the long run, you know, for if you ever need to record something at a mass, you know, post mass later. Really, we would highly recommend having a camcorder.
Not to mention, you're also going to have the option to zoom in very close and get a wider shot and not have to worry about moving anything. You know, it'll look great.
Yeah. So that's the most important part. And you don't, I mean, yeah, we could, if any of you have specific equipment that you already own that, you know, you don't want to plunk down investment on another camcorder, we can work with you on like how to make your current equipment work if you have questions about it. This here is the key, the Elgato HD60S Plus. This is what you guys probably already know. This is an HDMI capture card. It plugs into your computer and lets you plug an HDMI cable in here, and it translates that into a video signal for your computer. So this allows us to live stream, you know, masses, or really anything. I mean, any HDMI source will work here. So you need as many of these as you have cameras.
Exactly.
And they're about $200 a piece.
And then our cables, you want to go into the HDMI cable first?
Yeah,
Matt?
we have a very long 100-foot HDMI cable that's a one-directional cable. You have to plug it in from the source end to the TV end. It won't work the other way. And we get this so long because, you know, we stream in the cathedral a lot, and we're running a camcorder at the very front of the church to our computer way at the back. And I'm sure that many of you guys have setups at your churches that are similar, where you need a camera to be close, yet your setup for the computer is way at the back. And I think 100 feet is probably about as far as we can really confidently recommend that you go, because the longer you go, the more delay or chance of signal error you will get.
And to highlight that, the camera, this cable is a boosted HDMI cable, which is very important for anything well over 75 feet.
Yeah, it has a built-in boost. This is actually the Amazon Basics brand, great brand. And it comes with a built-in booster in it. And this one runs about 65, 70 bucks per, and we have two of them because we do a 2-camera setup.
The next thing on our list is how we get the audio to the camera. So we, at the cathedral, we have an XLR out, which we can plug this female end of the cable right into our audio out. In the video, we will show, it will go more in depth on like how to hook that into the camera. But basically, this is what it looks like. It's easy. We have like a 50-foot cable that we just plug into our camera.
I bet most of your churches have this. If you're not already using it, I'm sure that there's probably some way that you can hook into your church's soundboard and get that clean audio from there. We went ahead and skipped the Ethernet cable, but basically just a quick tip. Whenever you're
The most important thing you're going to want with the tripod, especially when you have a camcorder like this on it, is that you're going to want to make sure it has a fluid head. And what that means is basically like you have two knobs on the tripod head that you have, one for panning the camera back and forth. Thanks, Matt. And so this knob would control the pan of the camera. And there's another knob on here which controls the tilt, so you can tilt up and down.
And it's very smooth. Like a lot of cheaper tripods that you can get, they don't have the fluid head. And for video, it's very important to be as smooth as possible because you kind of get that, you know, herky-jerky motion, you know, when you're panning live. And, you know, sometimes you get feedback that you don't want to give people motion sickness on your stream. So just be as smooth as possible on your pans. And so as we mentioned before, well, I mean, you know, I'd mentioned before, we stream using OBS, and I know that a good amount of churches in our diocese do the same. But rather than send our stream straight to YouTube or to Facebook, we subscribe to a service called Restream, which you'll see a couple of screenshots of what it looks like up there. It's basically a service that allows you to stream to multiple platforms at the same time. We found it to be very helpful, especially to grow our social. presence, you know, on multiple platforms. We can stream to Facebook, YouTube, Twitter.
One important thing to note, though, is Restream will not stream it to Instagram. Instagram's finicky.
Well, Instagram, you kind of have to cheat the system a little bit to stream there, and you need to have a vertical video. And most of your live streams are going to be streaming like this, not like this. So if you want to do Instagram, that's a whole other topic. I mean, you can reach out to us if you have a desire to do that, because we have done it, but it's not particularly intuitive to do. And Restream, oh, sorry, can you go back one more? The pricing on it, we have this the $41 a month plan, which just lets you stream to more destinations, because often, like, we're streaming to us, the cathedral, like if it's at a school, like we'll stream to PBI's Facebook and YouTube for them. We come to a church for Bishop Burbage Mass, like we'll stream to their pages for them. But for most people, the standard option will work. That gets you everything that you need. The free will work, but it won't allow you to stream to a Facebook page. That's an important thing. So like it would let you stream to your personal Facebook profile. Like me as Matt, I can stream, but I could not stream as the cathedral on the free plan. You'd have to go with at least the standard to get that functionality, and this starts at $16 a month. So now we have a fun video for you that sort of highlights our setup, kind of the things we just talked about, but in a fun way. So enjoy.
Hello, I'm Jim Salitsky.
And I'm Matt Riedl, and we're multimedia producers for the Diocese of Arlington, which means we produce all of the live streams that you see on our social media channels, like Masses with Bishop Burbage, Uplift Arlington, Theology on Tap, you name it.
And today we're going to help you go through our live streaming process, whether you have a live stream set up, whether you don't, whether you just want to improve it. We hope that these tips and these little nuggets of information help you out. And disclaimer, if you already have a PTZ set up, most of this will not be relevant to you, as we will be doing it with camcorders.
Great, so let's get to it.
So we're here in the studio with our camera. This is the Sony NX100 camcorder. It is a professional camcorder, as you can tell via its XLR inputs. Now, you all might be more used to a DSLR setup. The reason we decided to ditch the DLR setup for live streams and go with a camcorder is because it's much safer when connecting wires and leaves less room for error. Let me explain. So as having said previously, there is XLR cables. There is a dedicated full HDMI out on this camera, as well as little loops to connect zip ties. For instance, instead of your normal 3.5 millimeter headphone jack that you plug into your phone and most audio inputs, we have a XLR input. The XLR input would connect directly from the sound of your church, which my coworker will explain more in detail, and it would go right into the camera. And once it plugs in, you hear a little click. That means it's securely plugged in. I'll pull on it, it's not going anywhere. I'd actually have to click this little push and pull it out. The next part would be connecting the HDMI cable. So we would take the HDMI. I have a little process I like to go through the handle, then through my zip tie. Let me loosen this. I like to give it enough room, enough slack, so that nothing pulls. Securely fasten that. Open up your port, plug in. Let me see if I can get this plugged in. There we go. And so if this gets yanked, as you can see, I'm really yanking on it. Nothing's happening right here at the port. Now, the reason I bring this up is because if your HDMI does come undone during a live stream, you're in for a fair bit of trouble. For instance, when we first began live streaming, when COVID just hit, we were filming the Palm Sunday Mass, and when we were panning our DSLR, the HDMI was plugged into a little mini on the DSLR, and it came undone. Like the cord pulled and it just loosened just a little bit. And what happened then is a whole feed went black, our stream died, and we couldn't figure out what it was because it didn't look like the HDMI came out at all. Well, this one doesn't have a lock on it. What it does have is it has 2 security measures before you get to plugging it out. And it's more snug and it's safer because it's a full HDMI out as opposed to a mini or micro HDMI. Some more features of the Sony NX100 camera include being able to dial your audio in once it's plugged into your XLR inputs, having a zoom lens on it. The lens goes from a super wide shot to a super tight up shot with the option to have a digital zoom on it, which means kind of imagine you're having an image and you just crop in on it, but it's a clear crop. You won't get too much noise on it. It has 3 options to zoom in, zoom out. You have one ring here that zooms in, zooms out. You have a you have a zoom motor up here and one right here on the handle. You also have what is known as an ND filter. Let's say it's a super bright day and you just can't get the image, it's overexposed and it's too white. If you put this, it's almost like putting sunglasses over the sensor of the camera. Super helpful if you ever do anything outside or there's really bright windows that are casting super hard light on your source, such as we had in the cathedral where we have a sky roof and the sun comes really hard directly down on the altar during noon mass. So this really comes in handy during that part. The last thing I want to talk to you about gear is our tripod. We currently use a Benro tripod. It has a pan, which you can lock after you're done panning it so it won't slip, because sometimes it'll just a little bit, it'll push to a side and it'll look weird, and you really don't want that. So you want a tripod with a good pan and a good tilt knob on it. And I think it's really helpful if you have a handle on it. It gives you much smoother movement, especially if you only have a 1 camera setup as opposed to a 2 camera setup where you can't really switch to 1 camera and make micro adjustments or major adjustments on your main camera. Again, we will have a list of equipment and we will promote this tripod on it.
What's up, everybody? So I'm the audio guy today. As we all know, half of the battle of any live stream is getting good audio, right? It's pretty plain to see the difference between live streams that are plugged in directly to source audio versus ones that just are using room audio, you know, either straight off of the iPad or whatever camera that you may be using. Now, we use what are called XLR cables. They look like this. They're round with 3 prongs on them. This is a digital audio signal straight into the source. It's a lossless system. You typically will be able to use these to get great quality audio from whatever soundboard you're using. So what you're going to want to do is find the mixing board, audio cabinet, whatever your church may have, like where all the microphones are going. You know, the priest's lavalier, the ambo mic, the cantor mic, etc., and find where those are all being connected, and find how you can get an output from that. That's the name of the game. And ideally, they will be XLR outputs. Usually there's at least 1 or 2 main outputs from any board. And one of them is typically being used to feed the speakers in the church. So pro tip, don't unplug any outputs on the back of your board that are currently being used. Otherwise, you may inadvertently cut out the speakers for anybody who's actually in attendance at the church. Not exactly advisable, but that is your prerogative if you decide to go that route. So again, look for XLRs. This will enable you to plug in directly to your camcorder. But say if you have an older board or a more analog-centric one that you can't find an XLR out, many boards will have one of these. This is what's called a 1/4-inch TRS output. Or, you know, a few decades ago, this was a standard headphone jack. We have a 1/4-inch to XLR adapter cable. You can basically get any kind of output to XLR. You can also get like a headphone jack adapter to XLR. Some older boards will have red and white RCA inputs to XLR. You can get these at Guitar Center, Amazon, really anywhere that sells audio gear. It's a fairly common peripheral to have, especially now that live streaming has become such a thing. Everybody needs XLR in audio cables for one purpose. So that's basically all you really need to know about audio. As I said, the main name of the game is to go straight to the source. Don't go have any in-betweens or anything like that. You just want to get that for the clearest possible sound for your live stream. And if you do, you're in store for a very clear sounding live stream, which, as I said, is half of the battle. So you may be asking, how do we actually get video signal from our camcorder to the computer? If you have something like a Mevo or a webcam, you just plug that directly in and no more questions, right? Well, this is the real key. We have what are called Elgato HD60S Plus capture cards. This is a little device. It's actually meant for gaming, which is funny, but we use it for live stream, as do many other people. It has an input for an HDMI there on the bottom, as well as a USB out. So what we do is we get our HDMI cable from the camera, plug it in right there into the in, and then we plug a USB-C into this plug right there. And we plug the other end straight into our computer like so. And this is able to recognize a video signal that's being sent over HDMI and make it appear on the computer as if it were a webcam or anything like that. And then we're able to switch it on our OBS software and basically produce a multi-camera setup using this. We have 2 of these, although we're thinking about buying a 3rd, but we have 2 of these currently, which means we can have up to a 2-camera setup. And if you're in a church that's any bit like ours, the cathedral, you may find yourself in a really big space with a long distance to go to get from your camera to the computer. Really, the longest distance of HDMI cable that we can confidently recommend is 100 feet long. That's what we use, and it looks like this. It's a giant bundle of cable. And you want to be careful when you wrap it up to make sure to not have any kinks in it, because if you have any kinks in your cable, it will degrade the long-term life of your cable. So don't wrap it like you'd wrap an extension cable. And most cables of this length are one directional too. So you can't just plug them in willy-nilly on any end you want. You'll see one end on this one says source on it, and the other one says TV. You want to plug the source one into the camcorder and the TV into the capture card. It only sends signal one way, and most shorter HDMI cables, like ones you use for your TV, are omnidirectional. They can send signal both directions. But when you get cables of this length, they typically will only send signal one way. And this cable we have is from Amazon. It's actually the Amazon Basics brand, 100-foot boosted HDMI cable. When you get to that length, you also want to make sure that it has a boost to it, because that's a really long way for signal to be traveling. And the boost just enables it to be able to send signal over 100 feet of length. So once again, we'll have a link to this specific cable that we use in our wish list of items at the end of this seminar if you want to just get what we have, because we recommend this cable. It's worked very well for us over our time live streaming.
Thank you so much for watching this video. If you have any other questions for us, please feel free to email us. Our emails will be included in this webinar.
And don't forget to like, follow, subscribe to us on social media, where you can see our work on a regular basis. And as an added bonus, be sure to be on the lookout, because after the conclusion of this seminar, we'll have a little list for you that has product pages for all of the items we've discussed so far. Thanks again. We'll catch you next time.
Take care.
All right, thank you guys. And now we're going to go into a Q&A portion. So for anybody who has questions for Matt and Jim specifically related to what they spoke about, you can either raise your hand or you can write your question in the chat, and they will call on you that way.
Okay, so we have Mary Castellano. I'm going to go ahead and unmute you, and you can go and ask your question.
And
Hello, can y'all hear me?
we can.
Gotcha.
Hi. Again, thank you. Just first of all, thank you so much for offering this webinar. This was super, super helpful. My question is kind of particular, but so I was taking a lot of notes, and I'm just wondering, what do you all use for mobile live streaming? I work at Nativity Catholic Church for anybody who's listening, and we are interested in streaming in our gym, like events that happen there. We do have a really professional live streaming system already set up in our church. It's working very well. But there are certain types of events like that we would like to offer, like date nights, like live stream talks, which aren't necessarily the most appropriate in a church, but more or a cafeteria. And so we're looking into how best to live stream from those locations. And so one of the things I wrote down was we don't have a soundboard in those systems, in those rooms, I think. But do you guys have any tips for streaming like mobily outside of the church setting?
Yeah, and that's a great question. Thanks for asking. Basically, and it's funny that you say from Nativity, because we have actually done a stream from Nativity's gym, and you guys do have a soundboard back on the stage there.
Okay.
In the box with a 1/4 inch output. You have the table over there. Like it looks like this kind. So you can do that from there. And so you could just bring the whole setup remote. But say this, just for hypothetical, like if you were in a situation where there was no soundboard or anything at all, I would probably recommend looking into one of these. This is a Zoom H6 portable audio recorder. It has XLR inputs on the sides. And say if you had like lavalier microphones or a podium with a microphone on it that you could hook up to this, you can have there's an output on the bottom here. Where's the kid? There's an output on the bottom here that you can plug this into a camcorder with some adapters. And then this you can take anywhere. Like you don't need the microphone to be powered or anything like that. We've done this setup before. One time we live streamed at work camp out at the Turner farm in the middle of a field. And obviously there's no soundboard in the middle of the field, so we brought 2 SM58 microphones and hooked them up XLR to this, and then hooked this up to our to our camcorder. And so that enabled us to have fully mobile live stream anywhere. Yeah, audio. So
that's very helpful. I appreciate that because, it's funny, as I was just asking my question, it did occur to me that we do have a soundboard in the gym, but in case we ever needed to stream from the cafeteria, I don't know if you can move one from the other. So that's very, very helpful. Will that also be on your wish list later on?
Yeah, we'll put this on the wish list.
And one other thing, if it's just a setup where you have one speaker and they're going to be at a podium, if you have a long enough XLR cable, the beauty of this camcorder is that you can plug the XLR cable into the mic from the podium and then string it right to this camera. And if you get the HDMI feed directly into your camcorder, the audio from the mic is going to be in the camera, so you don't even have to have another setup.
You could just set something up like this on your podium, and then on the bottom, have your cable running all the way to the camcorder, and that would give you totally mobile audio setup.
Wow, thank you very much.
Hey, gentlemen, I'm going to ask a follow-up on behalf of Mary or others who might have a couple questions. You mentioned when we live streamed in that field, how did we get internet? Because you do have to have, obviously, internet to stream. So that is a linchpin of a lot of things, depending on where you're going to set up. You have to have reliable internet. So my question for the guys would be, can you do it from wireless if there isn't a wired option in a particular space or building? And then when they hook up that microphone, do they need a splitter? Because that microphone's probably hooked up to the speaker system also. So would they need a splitter cable? So if you could just clarify that.
Yeah, generally, We are comfortable live streaming on Wi-Fi, depending on how close you are to the router. And you can tell generally, it's a little technical to get into, but if you like right click on your source, it will tell you how far away you are. And, you know, as long as there's a decent signal to noise ratio, you can do it.
Matt, don't you run a speed test before every time you live stream?
I do, and probably the lowest speeds I'm comfortable live streaming on are 5 Mbps upload.
And it's really easy to check your speed test. All you would have to do is once you're connected to either your phone's hotspot or the Wi-Fi, open up your browser, type in internet speed test, and you can run a speed test.
Right on Google. The one thing I would say is if you're in a place that is like public Wi-Fi, the more users that are on it, the slower it's going to get. So if there's anywhere that you're going, like say, for example, when we did Theology on Tap a couple weeks ago, or that was just last week, we were able to plug in actually our Ethernet directly into their office, like their personal staff internet. And we also had the password for their like staff network.
And to answer Billy's question about getting a splitter, if you have your microphone going into a PA system, the beautiful thing about if there's a PA system, there is normally an audio out on that board to plug directly into your camera or your recorder.
Generally, most PAs have a pass-through on the back that you can plug into. Like we have one back there that has that as well. Hope that answers the question. Internet is a sticky topic.
Okay, well, if there are no other questions, then we'll move into the promotional side of social media. And so like Billy had mentioned in the beginning, when COVID hit and the guys like scrambled to learn live stream and we were just trying to like bring it all together, one of the aspects of it that we quickly realized is you could have a beautiful setup, but if you are not promoting it, you're going to get very few people online attending. And so I think Billy had mentioned or suggested that we start to do an email blast out before live streams. And so I was pushing it out on social media, but to augment that, we actually started to every Mass, we would do an email. So if it was a Mass with Bishop Burbage, we would have, sometimes if it was a bigger Mass, like Palm Sunday or Holy Week, we would stagger emails where we would do like 5 days before, we would have an email go out that says, join us for a live stream. We would have a preset link that Matt would make on YouTube, and that would have a thumbnail. So if you guys have any sort of imagery of your parish, I highly recommend, and I've said this in our social media trainings before, to at least once a year have a photographer come out to your parish, take some really beautiful photos, because in the instance of COVID, we had been doing that, and thankfully we had a bank of photos that we could use to promote and to push things on social. So we make those thumbnail YouTube links, we put them into an email, we embed them in an email blast, and that will go out a week ahead. And then if it's a really big Mass, we'll also do a same day reminder. And so I recommend, if it is, you know, a Mass that you really want to promote or a live stream event that you really want to promote, this same day really helps people to remember. And so also for like parents and people who have a lot going on, it's a helpful reminder to have something go out in the morning leading up to the event. So we do the email blasts, and then on social media, the same thing, like the email, we'll do the graphic like a week ahead to, you know, create a Facebook event, put out the graphic, you know, get it in people's minds like, oh, this is something that is upcoming. And then the day of is a really important push as well. So some fun things that I'll do the day of a live stream will be like a countdown. So like when we did Uplift Arlington, which was a live stream holy hour, a couple hours before, I did a online countdown, which says like, you know, 5 hours, this holy hour is upcoming. You can also do a poll. So if you can see in the screen, it says, will you be joining the holy hour in person or live stream? So 28% said yes, they'll be coming to the cathedral in person, and then 72% said they'd be watching live stream. So that's not only like a fun thing, but it's also helps you to know, like, okay, this many people, at least on social media, we can guarantee that around this amount of people will be attending in person. And that's all on Instagram. But certainly all platforms have their own way of promoting. So with Facebook, I would recommend the YouTube link that you've preset for sure, the time that the event's going to take place, and then any graphics that you have to go along with it. But with Instagram, there's some flexibility there with doing polls and things like that. So then like in the center, you'll see that I had a graphic for the day before the event. And so I said, you know, tomorrow this is happening, join us. And, you know, as the social media manager of your accounts, you might feel like this is super redundant. You know, am I just blasting this out continuously? But I do think that it's important to be reinforcing that reminder, because the same people looking at your stuff day of might not have been the same audience that was looking at it yesterday. And then the day of, this is kind of a darker image because it was dark in the cathedral, but if you have a pamphlet or anything at the Mass or at the Holy Hour, you can take a photo of it, and you could say, you know, doors opening at this time, or any additional information that you want to add, like day of. But yeah, I just highly recommend like pushing it as much as possible on social media, and kind of having that like strategy of staggering it. So a week ahead of the event, doing a push, and then throughout the week, you can like kind of intersperse it between your other content. And then day of, like really having that heavy push day of is something that we've seen to be helpful. I'm not going to go too crazy into ads because in truth, I am still learning them myself. But here are some things that have helped me on Facebook. And one of them is definitely micro-targeting. So when I first started working here and I was super new to the whole ad thing, I would just choose like Arlington, Virginia for my audience that I wanted to target with a Facebook ad. So I would create my event. I would say, you know, live stream of Bishop Burbage. You know, I'm just going to target all of Arlington. But those weren't super effective. So then I started to micro target, and what you can do is you go into Facebook, and where it says Arlington, Virginia, or whatever area you're in, you click on that when you're going to boost your event. And instead of a region, you pick a specific place. So pick your church is what I would recommend. And then within a 30 to 50 mile radius of your church, then you can target those people. And that has proven to be much more effective, I've seen. And then another way that you can push ads for your event can be people who have liked your page, or people who are friends of people who have liked your page. I would just say experiment with this, but with us, I have found the more successful I have been with RSVPs on Facebook has been targeting people who like your page. Because if you think about it, if we're trying to like spread out to people who have never liked your parish's page, they've never, you know, been a part of the community, you can certainly do that and try some ads in that way. But I think with this, it's important to like really target the folks that would be watching a live stream Mass, because it's such kind of like a niche audience. So I think that is it for me. But I wanted to just take any questions if you guys have any questions. And we will also email all of this information after. We're going to send a video of the presentation, as well as the video that the guys put together, and the links to all of the items. So if you need a refresher or to go back, we will be sending this out after.
One thing I'd like to follow up with, you know, while people may be thinking of the questions that they want, is a lot of the key that Bridget's employed and brought to us is really the planning and thinking through the audience that's actually going to be watching that live stream. You know, we think live stream, it's for everybody. It's really not. There's a certain audience that's going to be interested in that. If it's for an event, you have to think through who are the people that are actually going to view this. What are their habits? You know, if you're doing an event that you really think is geared toward parents and families, don't do it before bedtime. Don't do it when they're going to be feeding kids. Don't, you're going to have to actually do it later than you would think you would typically need to do it. You kind of have to think through a lot of the practicals, and then you also you look at your successes and your failures and say, okay, why was it a success and why was this a failure? Just look at the metrics of it, look at maybe comments or feedback that you get on it, and really think about the reason for that. A lot of the successes in any social media promotion, especially right now, is this micro targeting. It's not trying to take the shotgun approach where we're trying to reach as many people as possible. Theologically, I get the reasoning behind that. Evangelistically, that's what we're trying to do, but you're not going to reach everybody with one message, one video, one live stream. You're going to have to produce multiple different things to reach small segments of society. This is how all of retail marketing is happening right now. Audiences are very tailored, very specific, and they're targeting those products to specific audiences with specific reasons. So you're going to need to think through your events. And this is why live streaming is a tool. It's not the one thing you use for everything. It's going to make sense in certain scenarios. It is not going to make sense in other scenarios. But then on the promotion side, also think through just, who's the audience and how do we reach them? That's I think, so critical to a lot of this. So we have one question here. It looks from Mary. How many days do you typically promote a post on Facebook? And what have you found to be successful? Bridget, I'll let you take that.
Yeah, so I have found, rather than promoting a specific post, although you can do that, the success that I have found personally with the live streaming has been to promote the event itself. So create the event as soon as you know that you guys are going to live stream a mass or an event. I would make that Facebook invite, and then depending on your budget, I would just try to stretch that money as far as you can for the longest amount of days. So I know for Uplift Arlington, I started a paid ad for the event itself 5 days before. And I put probably $10 a day into it, but we ended up yielding lots of RSVPs from that. So I would focus on putting your money, especially if you're on a budget, put that money towards promoting the event on Facebook. And you can boost all of your events. So if you go to the events tab in Facebook, you just scroll down to the event that you created and it'll say boost event, and you click on that, and that's where you're going to get into the micro targeting. And you should really put in the address of your parish, would be my recommendation. And then you can choose the radius around that parish. Certainly, there's different types of events where maybe you would change that strategy if it was, let's say, a speaker is coming to your parish, and you don't necessarily need it to be parishioners or people in your area. If you're trying to draw a crowd from all over, you could certainly widen that. But I would say target closely as much as possible. And I would focus on putting the money into the Facebook event itself. I think there's actually a question back to the guys about OBS. So Matt and Jim, do you want to answer that? It was, they're using Vimeo and Mevo right now. Are they limited by using Vimeo versus OBS?
Sure, and that's a good question, Patrick. Basically, there's nothing wrong with Mevo. It's a great platform. And I could be wrong, but I'm pretty sure that Mevo actually comes with a Vimeo subscription. So hence, you're sort of really maximizing your purchase of the Mevo by going with Vimeo. Basically, it just depends on what your goals are for the live stream. If you eventually want to have a multiple camera setup, you'll probably eventually want to transition away from the Mevo. But depending on, like I said, it just goes back to the goals that you have, because I'm assuming that your Mevo is probably set up sort of in the center aisle, and you can, switch the camera angles on your phone. And there's nothing wrong with that. But to answer your question, yes, it will limit you a little bit in the long term, because you won't really be able to ever upgrade the camera, or really have a multiple camera setup, unless I'm not 100% familiar with all of the Mevo specifics. Maybe you can have multiple Mevos, but the beauty of a setup like this and going into OBS is that you can always change the camera. that you use. Like if you started off with this and but you were like, man, I'm really not satisfied with the quality of the video. You know, I want to blow $10,000 and get a cinema camera for our live stream and stream in 4K. You know, you could still use this same thing and just upgrade your camera. With a Mevo, you know, you don't really have the upgrade ability down the line, so it will restrict you a little bit. And as well as the audio, that's also a problem with the Mevo. Is, if I recall right, I'm pretty sure Mevo has just a standard 3.5mm headphone jack on the back for your microphone input, which you could get, like if you have a mixing board with an XLR out, you could get this and convert it all the way down to a headphone jack. It would probably be possible. But audio is going to be tricky on the Mevo long term. But I'd say, you know, just depending on, you know, your priorities and how long term you're thinking. Because I mean, I like the Mevo in general. It's a good way to get on live stream, especially if you like don't have a ton of time you can allot to setting it up. You know, it's handy. I know Paul VI High School uses a Mevo every day for their masses. St. Joe's in Alexandria was using a Mevo, at least until recently, when they have upgraded to PTZ cameras since, and they talk about just how much they've enjoyed the improved quality of their stream. But in essence, there's nothing wrong with a Mevo. It just will, that's probably the peak of your stream. You know, it's not going to get really better from there without more equipment purchases.
I could offer a little advice, just kind of a management standpoint. When you're thinking through the equipment, it's, you know, good to use what you have for as long as you can. And then when you ask for, you know, your pastor for money to purchase additional equipment, always think about what's going to be both simple, repurposable, and durable. You know, the less you have to go back to them, the more they're going to appreciate what it is you're able to provide out of that, especially with, you know, COVID and offertory being down in some cases, and just the fear, even if offertory isn't down, just the fear that, well, what's the winter going to look like, or cases going to go up, especially right now. If you have something and it's working, I would continue to use that. We don't need to overcomplicate, especially when we're thinking of the actual audience size of most of our live streams. But when you do upgrade, think about, like what Matt was saying, can multiple cameras plug into this? Because our cameras might change. I don't want to have to ask for a new camera and all of this other equipment to go with it. Does the software work with it? Is it Mac or PC compatible, depending on what you're using? Just as you go, the less you have to ask for, the easier it's going to be to get yeses to the really critical things that you need. Bridget, we have a question from Veronica. She says, we have 8 masses that we live stream during the weekend, as well as multiple daily masses, but it seems to crowd up our Facebook a lot and lowers interaction, which I know isn't great. So her question is, what's the best way to share and promote live streams on Facebook, given that context?
Yes. Yeah, that is a really good question. For that instance, I would create a reoccurring Facebook event. And I would have that Facebook event be your mass schedule of live streams. And if you want to put a little bit of money into it, even, you could just have that reoccurring. And so it's going to continue to pop up in people's feeds. But it's just going to show the entirety of the live stream mass options for your parish. And I think that that's something that would be helpful to everybody, because they're going to find the time that they want to go to. It's continuously going to be showing up in their feed because it's reoccurring, but you're not having to do the manual labor of having to make a new post and a new post. You're just having Facebook do the work for you. So I guess the only downside to that is it's not going to be like it's an individualized graphic for each mass time. But, you know, as a parishioner myself, a lot of times I always just go to the full schedule, and I just want to know, you know, a refresher of what are the times and the availabilities for in-person mass or live stream. So if you just have that event set to reoccur, it's just going to continuously pop up for people. And you can create a really nice graphic that says, you know, we live stream at these times, but you're not having to do the like continuous posting yourself. Unless it's a special mass that your pastor is like, wait, we really want you to push this one. then you could kind of, you know, micro plan for that and create like multiple days leading up to that special, you know, mass for whatever, maybe it's Christmas mass, something like that. Those might deserve their own posts and their own graphics. But if it's just a daily mass schedule or the Sunday live stream schedule that doesn't change, I would just recommend doing reoccurring Facebook ads for the schedule. I think that is all we have, unless anybody has any other questions.
And one last thought for folks as they consider if they have other questions. We want to continue to do webinars like this. This isn't, our hope is to be able to provide these on a regular basis. So if there's another topic that you think would be of value, and it doesn't have to be, in the social media or video world, but it certainly can be, website, creation or production, public speaking, anything in that communications world that, that we do here in the communications office, we would want to help provide that. Certainly others on social media, Bridget's really elevated our engagements considerably since joining the team. So maybe that's a topic that we could get into. I want you all to just tell me, feel free to send me an email and let me know what you would like to see down the road. And we would certainly want to provide a webinar on that. That's the upside to these tools and these technologies. They've got their limitations, but it can bring us together, and we want to help rise the tide of communications in the diocese. And if there's something that we can teach in an hour or so webinar like this that rises the tide for what you all are able to produce and do, we want to do it. And if we have to bring in an outside presenter to do that, again, whatever it takes, we would want you all to have what you need to feel confident in the work that you do, because it is critical work. You're helping amplify the voice of your pastor and the church in general. So again, I also want to say thank you for what you're doing. The fact that you're on this call shows that you want to bring the people of God closer to his church, and these are great tools to do it. So I'll hand the rest of it off to Bridget.
So in conclusion, we wanted to just share with you guys the benefits of the live stream setup that we have been using, which is camcorders versus mobile. But like Billy said, if you guys are using mobile setups and you're happy with it, this is just to kind of add more tools to your toolkit, should you guys want to advance your setup in the future. Some of you all have PTZs, and so that's certainly a great setup already. But we will send you guys after this the list with links to everything that Matt and Jim talked about. And we also have our emails right here for anyone who may need them to write them down and email us individual questions or any sort of follow-up to this webinar. Thank you guys so much for attending, and we will send you guys all the follow-up materials after. Take care.
God bless everyone.